It is nice to see you all out there in Molasses Hall. Give it up for Molasses Hall. Um, I'm so excited. NarraScope 2022, this celebration of interactive narratives and adventure games. As my intro said, born and raised in Los Angeles, where I am right now. Started my career in film and television, where I'd bounce back and forth between special effects production, for movies like Cabin in the Woods and the bad Indiana Jones movie, and documentary films, including Super High Me, which is kind of a cult movie, just a takeoff on Morgan Spurlock's film Super Size Me. And then currently my day job is designing and building theme parks, museum exhibits, and interactive installations. In my spare time, I create and produce immersive and playable theater as Mr. and Mischief with my partner Andy. So redundant. And yeah, we are probably best known for Escape from Godot. Lydia, don't worry, everyone has a different way of pronouncing it. Which is a classic existential play redesigned as an escape game, giving audience members 60 minutes to get out of the theater while a play is being performed live on stage. Our most recent playable theater piece is 40 Watts from Nowhere, which premiered at the La Jolla Playhouse's Without Walls Festival in San Diego this past April. It's what we described as an experiential documentary about a pirate radio station in 1998. This talk is going to sort of explore the toolkit we employed to build this experiential documentary, our method and approach to narrative design, as well as narration, physical interaction, and theatrical effects. We were focused on building an exciting interactive story and inviting the audience to live a story that has already happened. Let's do some quick basics on narrative design for immersive theater. Most of this is going to be familiar to all of you, but it helps with the setup. The best experiences start the second you buy the ticket. It sets up a tone. The very beginning of the experience, usually some form of onboarding or tutorial type situation, should raise the volume of that tone and give you a little bit of prologue into the story. And then the main experience, the bulk of that story, should be harmony based on that initial tone that's been set and then introducing complementary elements. The finale should be the payoff, the culmination of all the elements coming together. And we hope that players walk away from our experience with a smile on their face, or even better, looking at the world differently than before. All this needs to be done leveraging as many ways to immerse the audience into the story, preferably by activating as many of our senses as possible, including a sense of agency, which is most often associated with this type of narrative work. Do my actions have an impact? And of course, as we talk about nonfiction, if it's already happened, what impact can you have? I mentioned it a second ago. I love Celia Pierce's term playable theater. It's very directly descriptive of what specifically Mr. and Mischief does. We create theater that you play. It fits us very perfectly. Documentary storytelling also has some specific nuances, and the same would go for interactive nonfiction. Some documentaries do their best to be unbiased, while others really wear their viewpoint proudly on their sleeve. Personally, I believe that great documentaries are built with a strong viewpoint, even if that viewpoint is, isn't this amazing? Isn't this world crazy? Isn't this subject fascinating or scary or incredible? Documentary storytelling is still storytelling, and human beings are drawn to that classic story structure of a beginning, middle, and end, conflict resolution, setup, and payoff. Interactive nonfiction has recently trended towards journalism and investigative storytelling, but there are personal stories being developed for many different interactive mediums these days. Most notably, the MIT Open Documentary Lab, I think some of you know, is an incredible resource for interactive nonfiction works. So if you're interested, I recommend looking through their Docubase online. Okay, so this year we produced 40 Watts from Nowhere, based on the book by the same name about the true story of Sue Carpenter, who ran a pirate radio station out of her closet in Los Angeles from 1995 to 1998. That's right, this is a three-dimensional Slide. No screen share necessary. We weren't searching for a pirate radio story. We weren't searching for necessarily contemporary story. We wanted to create an experience that used our city, Los Angeles, as part of its overall setting. And we were searching for a story, a subject matter about local and obscure Los Angeles history, but definitely something a little more playful than grisly murders or Hollywood drama, something like that. I came across an article that mentioned Sue's radio station, KBLT, and after a few internet K-holes and a quick stop at Amazon, I had a copy of the book in my hands a few days later. I ripped through it in a day, and when I was done, I told Andy, this is our next show. It has everything that makes immersive storytelling great. A secret hideout, a host of personalities, a lot of tactile stuff like mixing boards, turntables, tangled cables. It's got rock and roll, and it has the looming threat and immediate stakes of possible shutdown by the FCC. At its center, it also has this incredibly cool and cool-headed main character, Sue Carpenter. A real quick businessy detour, because I think some of you may be interested if you're like me. You want to know a little bit about just the basics of adapting a book or anything. I'm going to give you just a quick version of our experience. Since we live in Los Angeles and Sue was based in Los Angeles for a long time, we reached out to our social network to see if anyone had a connection, and we got a hit. We were emailing her a few days later, chatted on the phone, and she hooked us up with her literary agent. We had a phone call with the agent, negotiated some very basic terms of an option agreement, in our case for live performance rights only. We signed the contract, paid the option fee. It wasn't a lot, but there was a comma in the number. And that provided us with the live performance rights for a calendar year. And then we got busy putting all our ideas down on paper. Many things changed as we worked on the experience. I think many of you can relate to that. One early notion was still the core premise we maintained throughout design and development, and that helped shape the whole thing. And so here's the first, and I think the most important aspect of building audience interactive work. Make a clear, simple promise and use all your tools to deliver on that promise. Our promise to whoever came to our show was, come run an illegal radio station for an hour and hear the story, the true story of KBLT. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how the whole show operates because it's important context for the rest of this discussion. This experience has a 5-person capacity per show, and as I mentioned, it's an hour long. Once all the audience members have arrived at sort of a check-in area, you're directed to take a short walk and look for a girl with a red backpack. When you find the girl with the red backpack, she walks you over to the apartment that is the secret location of KBLT. During this walk, you're going to get some house rules as well as pertinent information about the setting and the stakes, as well as who you are, what role you're playing. The audience is Sue Carpenter. You are Sue Carpenter. You are all Sue Carpenter. Once inside the apartment, you're given wireless headphones, and one person is handed a CD labeled The Beginning. And the DJ host leaves, and you are left in your apartment by yourself to explore, by yourselves to explore. The apartment is small and sparse. I have a little CAD plan that we made for it. It's pretty small. And so it's only a short time before you open the closet door to find the radio station. The walls are filled with CDs, crates with records, concert posters. There's a plywood desk covered in stickers with a microphone and all the stereo equipment all over it. Switch out the CD and press play on The Beginning, and you get that crunchy opening riff of Beck's Devil's Haircut. A few moments later, a woman's voice begins to tell you the story of how KBLT came to be. The narration is all in second person because you are all Sue Carpenter. From here, you listen and dig through records because you have to get some music ready to play next. And with each track you play, which you choose, you're treated to more and more of Sue's story. In the middle, there's a physical montage where each Sue has to perform one aspect of your increasingly chaotic, busy life. Ripping bills, untangling cables, mashing keyboards, basically trashing your apartment. I don't know if that's going to show up well. We had, there's also disposable cameras circa 1990s for the audience to basically do our documentation for us. And the pictures came out great. After all that, you still have to get another song queued up to play, except this time the transmitter has stopped working. It's been shut down by the government, and the radio station is gone. Except it's not, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So focusing on our core promise to the audience helps to keep the project on the road while you drive the work and helps filter our thinking at challenging junctions. For better and for worse, when you're stuck, how do we continue to deliver on this central promise? When we want to add something else to the show, an interaction, a story point, it now has to pass this basic test. Is this helping the audience continue to run the station? At one point in the script writing phase, we wanted to create opportunities to connect more of Sue's experience as a newspaper journalist, but that was always something she did outside of her apartment and away from the station. It was a physical and mechanical distraction, so that was something that had to be removed. Running the radio station is the overall mechanism in how the audience both engages with and receives the story. Everything is connected back to the audience running the station. There was also a period of development where we were drafting some very light puzzles to each chapter of the story, and there were some really fun ideas that added more interaction. It allowed more of the people to be busy during the performance. But the core promise wasn't to gamify a radio station. We were still telling this true story, and that was what we wanted to do. And the true story was that there's a radio station that needs to be on the air. On paper, the interactivity being running a radio station is not the most thrilling, unless you don't know how to use a record player, or unless you are particularly nervous about talking into a hot microphone. Don't assume that interactivity has to be complex or engineered. Oftentimes, simple and somewhat transgressive actions can carry a lot of weight. Immersive theater creators bristle about the word immersive being wielded with great abandon these days, because the goal of our work is very much to use all the senses to immerse you into the setting and story world. Theater is typically sitting in a dark room and watching a stage. Immersive theater is supposed to be sitting in the room where the show is supposed to take place, walking through the area where the show takes place, and then layering more to that, be it taste, smell, touch, etc. So we wanted to further deepen the connection between the audience and KBLT, and so we chose the main delivery method for the story to be headphones, like you would wear in a radio station. It acts as both, the auditory sense as well as touch. Having this sort of, crown, this sort of apparatus on your head is very useful to that immersion. It's also the only way you can hear the show, hear the output of the station whatsoever. If you take it off, you don't get anything. It's also not coincidental that this also allows for a more COVID conscious experience, since we don't have any live actors in the room with you, except for our host at the very beginning for a very short time. And for this particular run, all audience members were required to wear face coverings. So you can see people with their headphones and their masks on. Thanks, people. Appreciate you. Additionally, we're giving players almost complete access to the soundboard for the entire show. There's one sound input that they don't have access to that's sort of back of house, and they can't turn it off. But other than that, we've given the audience, the players, complete control of the sound. They're responsible for playing music, introducing the songs on the microphone, and maybe most importantly, not breaking my turntable. And we were lucky enough to get access to one of the original sound engineers for KBLT, who talked me through all the equipment that was used in the actual station. This is stuff that wasn't in the book, right? We got sort of extra access. There were 2 CD players, which Sue had to keep replacing because they would burn out so quickly, because consumer products will burn out faster than sort of the prosumer products. There were 2 tape decks. I believe there were 3 turntables and a microphone, and then a pretty advanced DJ mixing board. Now, it would have been amazing to have all these things and truly recreate the station, but it also would have vastly overcomplicated the audience's role. During playtesting, there were a lot of adjustments on how much equipment we wanted to provide to the audience. When there was a lot of equipment, it would overwhelm most players and draw way too much time and energy. It raised the stress level a lot as well. So we started to pare down in each playtest the equipment until we found the right balance, including choosing a very, very simple 1990s Radio Shack mixing board that I could find on eBay, and that still worked. I was very impressed by the build quality of those things. And even at this simple level, there were people who hadn't used a CD player in 20 years. And so it was still taking a moment to remember that tactile function of ejecting the CD, queuing up, the track, and pressing play. There was also a large number of younger guests that had no idea how to operate the turntable. And as dismaying as this was, more often than not, it resulted in an older audience member just gleefully teaching them how to use the turntable and drop the needle on their chosen track. And I will tell you that it's those types of interactions that you can't expect them to happen, but when you find them happening really in play testing and prototyping, you want to give every opportunity to nurture that. It could have been easy to put a little guidance sheet on how to run a turntable, but there were certainly groups of all younger people that never touched the vinyl, and that's okay. They still had something like 400 CDs to choose from and play. And there were those times where the generations blended and truly created a really magical experience for everybody. The point is, at every opportunity, with every sense, we want to be connecting players physically and emotionally to the space they are in and the narrative being delivered. This is about the embodiment of the character and putting you in that place, in that moment in time. And it's illegal and it's real and it can't exist without you being there. If no audience shows up and no one presses play at the beginning, there's no story. As experiential designers, we are focused on the feeling that is being portrayed. This is what it feels like to be listening to punk rock records in a closet. This is what it feels like when every second you're listening to music, you're breaking the law. This is what it feels like to be the secret beating heart of a neighborhood subculture. When we have a full range over designing how it feels to be in the story, we are free to make every word the truth. There were a couple drawbacks to our particular approach and design. I mentioned earlier, we really weren't able to have any live actors in the space with the audience. The story of KBLT is filled with characters, the volunteer DJs, the engineers, bands that come in to spin records or play music live. But because we kept the focus on Sue, we weren't able to shine a light on some of those other great people involved. And number two, there wasn't a lot of time to tell some of the supporting stories around Sue and KBLT. Sue was an incredible magazine writer and newspaper journalist. All the while running a radio station in her closet, she was heading out on assignments for the LA Times, Jane Magazine, Marie Claire, and others. There's a good portion of the book that is devoted to other pirate radio stations around the country. Outside of San Francisco, you've got lots of politically minded pirate radio stations, and in places like Miami, the airwaves are just jammed with underground hip-hop artists broadcasting their original work. Before I start to wrap this up, I did want to talk about another interactive nonfiction or documentary experience that shares some similarities to the approach we took. And I think it's worth discussing. It's relatively recent. It's Lance Weiler's Where There's Smoke. This debuted at the Tribeca Film Festival's Immersive Virtual Arcade in 2019. And it was a physical installation, also low throughput and also about an hour long. The experience is very personally significant to Weiler as it is about his relationship with his late father. Lance Weiler has been working at the forefront of immersive and interactive storytelling for decades now. And Where There's Smoke is an excellent example of leveraging many different narrative devices and mechanisms to deliver this story, which happens to be very real and very personal. And something struck me that Weiler said, which is at its core, the project is a generative work that presents a different experience at every showing, and yet it doesn't exist without direct interaction from its participants. And just as Weiler is searching his own upbringing, players are given a flashlight and encouraged to search the room they are in, this physical installation, for items that will trigger portions of the story, though the order of which is emergent based on each group. Where There's Smoke offers multiple artifacts that trigger story moments, but with limited inputs. Each group can't see everything available, therefore each show is unique. On top of which, there is no linear timeline to adhere to, which also helps support the design direction that grief is a nonlinear experience. And I see someone mentioned in the chat, there's a digital version of this that I believe Weiler adapted in the early months of the pandemic. There's a video about it. I encourage you all to go check it out. I can't get into it here. The approach to the digital version is really clever, really pretty cool. Okay. But what choices do you have? In 40 Watts from Nowhere, are you just playing music and listening to a story? To be blunt, yes. We did not want to include any false choices, giving players varied options, but that led to the same outcome. The interactivity is environmental, and it has 100% agency. If you want to follow up David Bowie with the New Christie Minstrels, or Hail Sousa, or Latin Pianos, or this one's great, Pick a Polka, there's no way we can stop you. The audience in the space is in full control of what's happening. But when you're talking about the impact the players have, there's a different answer. We made one addition to the story of 40 Watts from Nowhere. Sue's book ends with the station transmitter being shut off by the FCC and her narrowly avoiding legal and financial calamity. KBLT never got to sign off, but now, because of you, we get to have the final broadcast. Sue gets to switch on the transmitter one more time and broadcast a thank you to the listeners, to the bands, to the DJs, the volunteers, the engineers, and everyone that was a part of turning Sue's passion into an obsession and into a community. And like the beginning, the audience finds a CD labeled The End. Inside is a short script, and each Sue has a line to read before pressing play on a final defiant anthem. This is a final action that all audience members must do together as they are one, as they are all Sue. Once again, fulfilling that promise, you are here to run a pirate radio station. It would not be operating without you. You are Sue. I think we have a few minutes for questions. If not, I'll be around at the conference the next 2 days. Excited to hear the other talks. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I don't have a slide with all my contact info, but I'm pretty easy to find on the internet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You just use your normal name in the Gather space, don't you?
I do.
Excellent. So you're easily found if needs be. Great. So thank you so much, Jeff. That was a really brilliant talk. Super interesting. Really new medium for me to hear about for the first time. So that was really interesting. Thank you. I thought what we could do is to give you some more time back. We could do about 4 minutes of Q&A. So Great. If anyone has any questions, please just do throw them in the chat. I will kick off with a general one to give people time to think. But I wanted to ask you, Jeff, what was the most surprising lesson that you learned from running it in this format?
Yeah, I think the most surprising lesson was probably that in so much of immersive theatrical work, people really care about the one-on-one or very low ratio to an actor kind of interaction. And in this case, we were surprised that people interacted with each other very comfortably and very well, and helped each other or showed each other funny records. We had a lot of weird old Leonard Nimoy records in there, or commented on each other's picks, like, I love that song, I love that album. And it immediately created a sense of community, while if we had actors, they might still be really focused on being the audience rather than really diving into participation.
Yeah. No, my next question actually was just on that piece, because obviously, theatre for a long time has been sort of battling about this gap between the actors and the theatre, and there's like a physical gap here between the action and the audience, right? Whereas this is far, far more immersive. You are literally in the story and influencing what's happening. And I don't know whether you picked that up in the reactions to this medium, where people came out and said, actually, I felt like it wasn't a story, it was a lived experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there were a lot of people that had this very nostalgic reaction to playing CDs or records. There was a lot of people that I didn't know, especially in our playtesting series, that said, "Oh, I used to be a college radio DJ, and this takes me right back." And yeah, there were a lot of people that they did walk away sort of feeling excited about what it meant to have an illegal radio station at your fingertips, and still that had some weight, had some meaning, and it still felt transgressive, even though today everyone has a podcast. Like, imagine if you turned the radio dial and every station was guys talking about movies. That is what the stations would be full of.
That would be great for me, but I understand might be a little bit of overload if every single station was like that. There was a question actually from Hoppin' Fun, who asked if there was any way to experience this outside of LA.
Ooh, great question. Not right now. The plan is to run it again in LA later this year, as that is the setting. There's some interest in other parts of the country. Stay tuned. I believe you can sign up we have a newsletter. Mr. Mischief has a newsletter. I say that hesitantly because I'm telling you, we put out like maybe 2 a year. So you are not going to get spammed, but you will hear about our escapades as they come up. There's a possibility it'll pop up a couple places around the country.
We've just had a comment through saying you have to come to London and talk about the London pirate radio stations.
Yeah,
perfect.
iconic example of pirate radio.
Yeah, exactly. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeff. This has been a really, really wonderful talk. I will not keep you on the line for too much longer.
No, thank you. There's more to do. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, NarraScope. I appreciate it. And I'll see everyone around.
Okay. See everyone.